Hey, welcome! Today we're jumping right into one of the most incredible, most dramatic short chapters in the Quran, Surah Al Feel. It's a story of raw power versus an absolute miracle, of arrogance versus the divine. And you know what? It all kicks off with a really strange question.
No, seriously, just think about that for a second. Could a flock of birds, I don't care how many, actually take on a real military force, especially one with war elephants? We're talking about the tanks of the ancient world here. It sounds completely impossible, right? Well, that impossible scenario is the very heart of the story we're getting into today.
So let's paint the picture. We're in the year 570. This is right before the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. You've got this massive, powerful army, led by a ruler named Abraha, and they are marching straight for the city of Makkah in Arabia. And their goal, well, it's about as bold as it gets. Now, this army was actually known as the People of the Elephant. Why? Because they brought actual war elephants with them, which you can imagine was an absolutely terrifying sight for the local Arabian tribes. Their stated mission was to march into Makkah and demolish the Kaaba, the ancient house of worship that stood right in the center of the city. The story in the Quran opens with this very direct question, and that word, seeing, is so interesting. The people being spoken to, they hadn't literally witnessed it, but in Arabic, seeing can also mean a kind of knowledge that is so certain, so widespread, it's as if you saw it with your own two eyes. That's how famous this event was. The very next verse asks this piercing question: did he not make their kaid go astray? Okay, this word kaid, it is absolutely crucial. It's not just a plan, it's a plot. It's a calculated, deceptive scheme with all these hidden, harmful intentions behind it. It implies a strategy that is truly malicious.
And this plot had layers. On the surface, the visible plan was simple, right? Destroy the Kaaba. But the hidden plan, the real kaid, was so much deeper. See, Abraha had built this huge, fancy cathedral back in his own land, and he wanted to divert all the valuable pilgrimage and trade routes away from Makkah. So this was really about dominating trade, crushing the political power of the local Quraysh tribe, and seizing total religious control in the region.
So, faced with this overwhelming force, the people of Makkah were, let's be honest, completely outmatched. Their leader, Abdul Muttalib, he didn't even bother trying to raise an army. He knew they were powerless. So what did he do? He gathered his people, they all retreated to the mountains surrounding the city, and he placed his complete and total trust in God to protect the sacred house. Okay, so the human defenders are totally out of the picture. How does the Quran describe what happened next? Well, this is where the story takes a sharp turn, from what looks like a historical beatdown to a full-blown divine intervention. And it's all told in just a few powerful verses. God's response wasn't what anyone could have expected. It wasn't another human army. It wasn't some force of nature like an earthquake or a flood. It was birds. Just small, seemingly weak birds, an army that no one could have possibly predicted or ever prepared for.
And the verse describes them as Tayran Ababil. Now this is important. Ababil isn't a type of bird, like a sparrow or an eagle. It's a description. It means they came in waves, flock after flock, group after group. Just imagine this relentless, overwhelming swarm descending from the sky. So what were these birds armed with? What was their weapon of choice? Not fire, not claws, not poison, but something that sounds almost ridiculously insignificant. Tiny stones of baked, hardened clay called sigil. So the stage is set for this unbelievable confrontation between overwhelming military might and, well, pebble.
The contrast here is just staggering. The weapon, a tiny little pebble. The result, absolute total devastation. The commentaries say that each little stone found its specific target with this supernatural precision, and when it hit, it caused the soldiers' bodies to literally disintegrate. The lesson couldn't be clearer. It's not about the weapon, it's about the power of the one who's wielding it. To describe the aftermath, the final verse uses this stunningly vivid image. It says, God made the army like asf ma'kul. Now what is that? It describes the leftover bits of straw and chaff after a harvest, after the grain has been eaten by livestock. It's the useless, chewed-up, trampled-on stuff that's left behind. So, to be made into athmakul meant total annihilation, a complete loss of their strength, of their form, of everything. They were reduced to nothing more than worthless organic debris. It was the ultimate humiliation for what was, just moments before, a proud and mighty army. And that's it. That's the final, powerful image the chapter leaves us with.
The great army of elephants, with its complicated plot and its overwhelming force, was rendered as insignificant as chewed-up straw by a flock of birds carrying pebbles.
So, that's the incredible story. But, it's so much more than just a historical account of a bizarre battle. It is jam-packed with timeless lessons about power, about our own plans, and about divine protection. Let's really distill what the core message is here.
All right, here are the big takeaways. First, God's power is absolute. It can overcome any earthly force and is not bound by the rules of physics that we see every day. Second, no matter how clever or intricate our human plots are, they're completely futile if they go against the divine will. Third, real victory comes from God, period. It's not earned with bigger armies or better technology. And finally, arrogance. Arrogance before God leads to one place, and one place only: humiliation.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's a fascinating story from over 1,400 years ago, but what does it really have to do with me today? Well, the commentaries really emphasize that this story isn't just history. It's meant to be a powerful, practical reminder for our own lives, right now. The story basically gives us a framework for resilience. So when you feel weak, when you feel insignificant, remember the small birds. When you're facing a problem that seems as huge and unbeatable as a war elephant, remember that even that mighty giant was brought down. And when you feel completely afraid and helpless with no one to turn to, remember that the Kaaba was protected without a single human soldier even lifting a sword.
And that's really the bottom line. This event is a profound sign. It teaches us that help doesn't always show up in the neat, predictable ways we expect it to. It can be sudden, it can be surprising, and it can come from the most unlikely places we could ever imagine, reminding us that there is a power at play that's far beyond our own tiny calculation.
So, we'll end with this question for you to think about. If a superpower army, which was the absolute pinnacle of human might at the time, can be completely and utterly undone by birds and pebbles, then where does true strength really lie? Where should we be looking for our own strength in our lives? Thanks for joining this explainer.